welcome to the deep dive. We are incredibly thrilled to have you with us today.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in.
If you're joining this specific conversation, it's highly likely you have a pretty profound interest in understanding the history of our modern institutions.
Right, you want to look back at how these cultural pillars operated before they were, as the arguments we're exploring today purport, before they were fundamentally captured.
Exactly. Captured by feminist and Marxist ideologies. And we know there is a massive audience out there for this.
Huge, especially among men's rights advocates.
Yeah, and those in the red-pilled manosphere who feel like the history of this whole institutional shift has been, deliberately obscure.
Swept under the rug.
So today, we are speaking directly to your interests. We're going to explore the really intricate, highly contentious arguments surrounding these cultural shifts that have impacted men in Western society today.
But before we jump into this massive undertaking...
Right, please take a second to like and subscribe to the show so you never miss one of these comprehensive deep dives.
It's a critical topic today, and honestly, one that requires a lot of nuance to properly unpack. We have an absolute mountain of material.
We really do. Today's discussion is an extensive chapter-by-chapter review of a highly provocative new ebook. It's titled Defending the West, a guide to the cultural battlegrounds of our time.
By Conrad Riker.
By Conrad Riker, yes.
Yeah.
Copyrighted in 2024, so it is fresh. It's current.
It's definitely making waves right now.
It is.
Yeah.
Now, we're going to dissect a huge stack of notes today, but to truly grasp the full scope of these arguments, you should absolutely check out Amazon, Kindle, and Google Play Books to buy the book for yourself.
Yeah, you need the source material. And we highly recommend that you follow the author at Conrad Riker on Substack.
That's right, at Conrad Riker on Substack, to keep up with his latest essays and the conversation he's curating.
Because it is a dense text. It's a sweeping overview of a very specific worldview.
Which brings us to our crucial mission and our disclaimer for today's deep dive.
Yes, very important.
Our mission is to unpack this massive stack of notes from Riker's book. We're distilling his core arguments about how Western institutions were supposedly captured. But before we go one step further, we have to issue our standard impartiality statement.
Right, because we are dealing with highly politically charged content today.
Exactly. We want to make it absolutely unequivocally clear to you, the listener, that we are not taking any sides today.
Not at all.
We're not endorsing the viewpoints of the author, nor are we condemning them. Our role here is simply as your impartial guides.
We're just objectively reporting on the content.
Just conveying the ideas, the arguments, and the history exactly as they are presented in the original source material. We're mapping out the architecture of his arguments.
That's the perfect framework. When we look at a text like Defending the West, we have to approach it as a cultural artifact.
Right.
By analyzing how he builds his case, we can deeply understand the perspective of the men's rights activists and the audience Riker is directly addressing.
So let's start right where Riker starts, the foundational premise. What really stands out to me right off the bat is that he frames this text as a literal call to arms.
Oh, absolutely. The preface doesn't ease you in, it drops you right into the trenches.
He argues Western civilization is facing this relentless assault from progressive and leftist ideologies. And the language, it's fascinating. He calls the book ammunition.
Ammunition and a weapon.
A weapon against false narratives, yeah.
The rhetorical framing there is aggressively intentional. When an author says this isn't just a book, it's a call to arms, they're doing something very specific psychologically.
Establishing the stakes.
Exactly. Using terms like ammunition, weapon, onslaught. He's building an argument that this isn't a polite academic disagreement, it's an existential threat to Western civilization itself.
And his target audience filtering is incredibly strategic. He explicitly addresses patriots and men who feel their voices have been silenced.
Silenced by leftist ideologies, yeah.
He's so focused on them that he actually tells anyone who disagrees to put the book down. He writes, "If you think the progressive agenda is a force for good, do us both a favor and put this book down."
It's a brilliant psychological strategy of exclusivity.
How so?
By telling a certain demographic to leave, he instantly creates a deeply loyal in-group for those who stay. He's validating their frustration. He's basically saying, I see you, I know why you're fed up, and I have the roadmap for how we fight back.
It's textbook movement building.
It really is, giving them a unified banner to rally under.
And for you listening, whether you agree with Riker or not, consider how often you feel your own values are under attack in modern discourse. Riker's tapping into a very potent zeitgeist here.
A palpable sense of alienation,
Right, so we have to understand the map he's drawing to understand the modern political landscape.
which bridges perfectly into how he traces the roots of this cultural fracture. He doesn't just complain about modern politics.
No, he gives a deeply detailed historical timeline. He argues our institutions were captured by something called critical theory.
And he says this didn't happen overnight. It was a deliberate infiltration starting in the 1960s and 70s.
Let's talk about the architects of that,
Yeah.
because he points straight to the Frankfurt School.
Right. For those unfamiliar, the Frankfurt School was a group of German philosophers, Max Horkheimer, Theodor Adorno. Riker argues that after traditional Marxist-Leninist economic theories kind of collapsed.
Because the Western working class actually got wealthy instead of revolting.
Exactly. The revolution didn't happen, so these thinkers had a problem. Riker says they rebranded the ideology. They shifted the focus from an economic class struggle to a cultural struggle.
And the philosophical shift there is heavy. He brings in Friedrich Nietzsche and Michel Foucault.
Yes.
He notes Nietzsche's declaration that God is dead. Riker argues that wasn't just theology, it was a cultural demolition. It paved the way for the belief that all morals and objective truths are subjective.
Just human constructs. Which is exactly where Michel Foucault enters his narrative. Foucault's theories on power dynamics are central here.
Foucault basically said knowledge is power, right?
Right, that societal structures we think are normal are just frameworks designed by the people in charge to oppress others. Justice systems, medicine, even grammar. Foucault viewed it all through this lens of power and oppression.
And Riker claims these philosophers reveled in being agents of chaos. This shift replaced the search for objective truth with a cynical narrative focused entirely on power dynamics.
Everything becomes oppressor versus oppressed.
So how did that European philosophy infect American institutions? Riker says it spread through academia, specifically the humanities.
Right.
Universities stopped focusing on great historical figures and started funding entire departments focused purely on race, gender, and sexual orientation using this exact oppressor lens.
And the mechanism for this, according to the book, was the 1960s radicals. He names Bill Ayers and Bernardine Dorn.
The ones who started out wanting violent revolution.
Exactly. There were radical progressives who thought America was an evil imperialist project, but Riker argues they had an epiphany. As he puts it, they ditched the bomb for the ballot.
Or the tenure track.
Yeah, the tenure track. They realized violent radicalism just lands you in prison. But taking over the institutions of knowledge production, teaching the next generation of teachers and journalists, that's permanent.
And he gives a fascinating historical example of how they weaponize language, the concept of white privilege.
Which is everywhere now.
Right, corporate, HR, media. But Riker claims it wasn't an organic sociological observation. He says it was deliberately introduced in the late 1960s by a white male scholar named Noel Ignatieff.
Yes.
Riker asserts Ignatieff's stated aim was to provoke deep-seated guilt among white Americans as part of a radical belief system called white abolitionism.
It's a crucial pillar of his argument. It shows how language shapes reality. Riker argues this engineered a framework where inherent racial guilt completely replaced the Western ideal of individual responsibility.
So if you're born with privilege, you're the oppressor, regardless of your actual life.
Exactly. He sees this as the toxic core of critical theory. It's inherently divisive.
So how did that academic shift hit everyday people, specifically men? Because this brings us to the core of his message for the manosphere audience, the cultural war on masculinity.
This is where he's most impassioned.
He argues we completely abandoned gender equality and moved into an era of outright systemic emasculation of men.
He draws a very hard line between early feminism and modern feminism.
Right. He says early feminism legitimately wanted equal rights voting, workplace equality, but once they got that, it morphed.
He asserts modern militant factions aren't interested in equality anymore. They are actively advocating for female supremacy and a matriarchal society.
They wanted to topple men and secure dominance by demonizing masculine traits, and he traces this back to media portrayals. He brings up a 1970 Mrs. Magazine cover.
The one that said, "I am not a toy, I am not a doll."
Yes. Riker claims that was the definitive shift where culture began chipping away at the value of traditional masculinity.
And look at his examples of modern media. Think about household product commercials. The man is almost always a bumbling buffoon.
Totally incapable of doing laundry or watching his own kids without the wife rolling her eyes.
Right. And when they aren't idiots, they're violent brutes. Riker argues that for every positive representation of a man, there are countless examples where he's the punchline or the villain.
He relies heavily on Christina Hoff Sommers here, doesn't he?
He does. He heavily cites her landmark book, The War Against Boys. She's a scholar at the American Enterprise Institute.
And she looks at how this affects children.
Toys, cartoons, video games. Riker quotes her directly, highlighting her conclusion that men and boys are being punished by society simply for existing and breathing.
Meaning, society has criminalized natural male behavior right from the cradle, which takes us straight into the educational system.
Where the rubber really meets the road.
Riker observes that modern schools actively suppress natural male impulses. Rough play is bad. Physical competition is toxic. Boyish aggression gets medicated with ADHD drugs instead of getting an outlet.
They're forced to adopt traditionally feminine qualities, rated on quiet cooperation and stillness.
And Riker clarifies, he says, empathy and cooperation are wonderful, but they're being imposed at the absolute expense of traditionally male traits.
Trace, he argues, built Western civilization. Scientific discovery, exploration, physical strength to build infrastructure.
He brings in Camille Paglia here, the American social critic.
Right, Paglia argues you have to honestly recognize the primal power of sexual attraction and biological differences between men and women to have a functional society.
And Riker interprets that to mean artificially feminizing men to fit a progressive ideal is highly destructive. You can't engineer away biology without severe psychological blowback.
And the real-world consequences of that blowback are grim. Riker brings hard data.
Yeah, let's look at the stats. He cites the National Bureau of Economic Research, young men dropping out of the workforce in unprecedented numbers.
Because they feel the system is rigged. The corporate workplace is ideologically hostile to them.
And the traditional rewards, respect, family stability don't exist for them anymore.
Then he hits you with the CDC statistics on suicide. Male suicide rates are 3 to 4 times higher than women's. Men account for nearly 75% of all U.S. suicides.
Riker draws a straight line from the devaluation of masculinity directly to those numbers. Our culture is killing its men, in his view.
Which leads to his full-throated defense of patriarchy.
That's a highly controversial stance.
Very. In academia, patriarchy is synonymous with oppression. Riker entirely rejects that. He argues it's a time-tested social structure rooted in a natural division of labor that ensures societal flourishing.
He points to Rome, Greece, Egypt.
Right. He quotes sociologist Stephen Rhodes saying the success of ancient civilizations was directly tied to patriarchal structures ensuring domestic and civic order.
So for his audience, preserving patriarchy isn't about oppressing women. It's about preserving Western civilization's stability.
Precisely. And if patriarchy is the macro structure, the nuclear family is the microstructure.
The absolute bedrock. Mom, dad, kids. Riker says it's the singular guarantor of a stable environment.
And he argues its erosion started with the 1960s counterculture. He connects the decline in masculinity and the rise of feminism to the explosion of single-parent households.
Which he correlates with higher crime rates, increased poverty, and lower educational achievement.
The nuclear family isn't just a nice idea to him, it's a survival mechanism for society.
But the family is only half the equation. The other half is faith.
Yes.
Riker pivots aggressively to religion, arguing there's an all-out war on Christianity in the West. He claims elites have been trying to remove it from the public square since the Enlightenment.
He details media complicity here, shows how Hollywood and the news portray Christians as close-minded bigots or dangerous zealots.
He cites the Media Research Center's 2020 report, Christian Bashing in the Media, and a 2018 Newsweek article about the new intolerance directed at religious conservatives.
He uses a profound quote from Pope Benedict XVI, Joseph Ratzinger.
Right. The Christianity isn't just rules, it's a way of life based on a faith relationship with God.
Riker claims that shared transcendent moral framework is exactly what the progressive left is trying to destroy. They want a secular utopia where the government dictates morality, not God.
And he links the attack on family and faith together. They're both institutions that historically uphold patriarchal values and promote morality independent of the state.
So attacking them is a tactical strike against male authority and individual responsibility.
So if these institutions are captured, how do people fight back? Or even talk about it? This brings us to the war on truth and free speech, cancel culture.
Riker's analysis of big tech is scathing.
He calls it the modern digital gulag.
Right. Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, he says they use opaque algorithms, shadow banning, and deplatforming to act as judge, jury, and executioner.
Silencing anyone who deviates from the progressive narrative under the guise of community guidelines.
And he provides a massive list of examples. Milo Yiannopoulos, Alex Jones.
Gavin McInnes, Tommy Robinson, the comedian Sam Hyde, all booted from the modern public square.
But not just the provocateurs. He points to the demonetization of PragerU. Even polite, educational conservative thought is suppressed.
He mentions Tucker Carlson and Ann Coulter facing corporate boycotts and physical threats just for voicing right-wing opinions.
This leads to his discussion on the intellectual dark web, because mainstream media like CNN, the New York Times, the BBC, they wouldn't touch these topics.
So alternative thinkers were pushed to the internet's outskirts.
Yeah.
Jordan Peterson, Sam Harris, Dave Rubin.
And they thrived there. They gathered millions of followers who were starved for genuine long-form debate.
Because the mainstream is so sanitized. Riker brings up The Coddling of the American Mind by Greg Lukianoff and Jonathan Haidt.
He also references Haidt's The Righteous Mind and Kirsten Power's The Silencing.
He uses them to detail how trigger warnings and safe spaces have completely sterilized debate on campuses and in boardrooms. It just creates fear-induced self-censorship.
People are terrified of the social and economic consequences of dissenting.
And the ultimate manifestation of this war on reality for Riker is the trans agenda.
He frames this not as a civil rights debate, but as a total ideological war on objective biology.
Demolishing the historical notions of male and female, forcing society to accommodate subjective ideology over observable biological reality.
It's rewriting laws, dismantling women's sports, changing medicine.
He points to J.K. Rowling as the prime example. She's a progressive feminist billionaire, yet she faced massive public backlash and death threats just for stating biological sex is real.
For Riker, defending the objective definitions of male and female is the front line in defending truth itself. Because if an authority can force you to publicly state biology is subjective, they've broken your connection to objective reality.
Then you'll believe anything they say.
Exactly. It's the most dangerous assault on individual free will.
So zooming out to the macro level, Riker looks at who is coordinating this: the deep state and globalism.
He describes the deep state as a very real network of unelected bureaucrats and globalist elites shaping policy from the shadows.
Unaccountable to the voter, using the surveillance state to control the citizenry. And he names names: George Soros and his Open Society foundations.
Riker claims Soros uses billions to stealthily fund radical leftist agendas and activist NGOs to erode national borders,
Creating a borderless, easily managed, socialist world government. Riker says a nation without borders is like a house without walls. Eventually, the roof crashes down.
and he fiercely attacks socialism. He says it's a fundamentally flawed, tyrannical experiment that leads to economic disaster every time.
He uses Zimbabwe under Robert Mugabe as the ultimate example.
Yeah.
Mugabe seized commercial farms for ideological reasons, giving them to cronies with no farming experience.
It caused a total collapse, turned the breadbasket of Africa into a starving basket case, prioritized ideology over competence, and you get starvation.
He also sharply critiques the climate change narrative. He views it as the ultimate globalist scam.
Designed to restrict freedom, control economies, and erode civil liberties by declaring a permanent emergency.
He claims UN data shows no significant temperature increase for 2 decades, framing the movement as an excuse for sweeping tyrannical control.
Which brings up the private sector. How does corporate America fit into this? Rikers has a scathing critique of woke capitalism.
He says major businesses have been completely co-opted. They've abandoned making good products for profit, opt instead to grovel for social credit scores.
Focusing hiring on diversity quotas rather than competence. Riker argues true diversity is hiring the absolute best person for the job, regardless of race or gender. Moving away from meritocracy is the death knell for Western innovation.
But he doesn't just leave the reader in despair. He provides a highly actionable blueprint for resistance.
A comprehensive plan. First, he urges readers to find their voices and end their self-censorship immediately.
Do not let your autonomy be a silent casualty. Speak up at work, at school, regardless of pressure.
Second, hit the establishment in their wallets. Actively support independent conservative media and whistleblowers. Activate grassroots movements like showing up at school board meetings.
Third, and this is vital for his core audience of men, he calls for a complete rejection of the toxic masculinity narrative.
He says it's a deliberate lie to weaken men. Reclaim traditional masculine virtues. Physical strength, courage, self-reliance.
And form tight-knit networks of like-minded men. Isolated men are easily canceled, but a network can survive and overcome.
Finally, he literally asks the reader to review and share his book. hand copies to friends to propagate the truth and spark a cultural revolution.
It's a remarkably comprehensive, unified theory of cultural decline from the right-wing perspective, connecting 1960s academics directly to modern HR policies and the male mental health crisis.
It's a potent narrative designed to mobilize a very frustrated demographic.
We've covered a massive amount of ground today. As we wrap up, we want to remind you of our core mission. We set out to thoroughly understand the right-wing perspective on institutional capture as laid out in Conrad Reicher's Defending the West.
We've walked through the architecture of his arguments impartially. Masculinity, critical theory, the nuclear family, big tech censorship, globalism.
Now we ask you to reflect. How do these arguments align with what you observe in your own life? Do you see this erosion of masculinity and free speech happening in your workplace, or do you view these cultural shifts through a more positive lens?
I want to leave you with an unscripted thought to mull over. If a society fundamentally disagrees on the definitions of history, biology, and truth, can it ever find its way back to a shared reality? Or is a cultural fracture inevitable?
How will individual free will survive in an era governed by algorithms and mass consensus?
Exactly. If we can't agree on basic facts, how do we govern ourselves as a cohesive nation?
That is a profound question to end on. Thank you so much for joining us on this incredibly extensive deep dive. Please remember to like and subscribe to the show so we can keep bringing you these unflinching analyses.
And we strongly encourage you to check out Amazon Kindle and Google Play books to buy Defending the West by Conrad Reicher. Dive into the source material and judge it for yourself.
And don't forget to follow the author at Conrad N. Reicher on Substack for more essays and content. Until next time, keep questioning the narrative, keep learning, and keep diving deep.